Alright, looks like we're live. What's going on, guys? This is David with HDR Performance. We're going to be doing some reviews on, well, just like pretty much everything. We're going to do some live tuning talk. We're going to look at some videos in regards to like how people are recommending you start tuning. Basically trying to get into anything unique. But as a professional tuner, we're just going to check it out, have discussion. If anyone has any suggestions about like videos to watch or what they want me to check out in regards to someone's project, or maybe they're tuning something the wrong way, I'm even open to like reviewing people's tunes live and trying to help them with it if anyone's up for that. So right now we're going to start off with this video right here. Is this Jimmy Oakes, I think is his name. He's got a video and it says how to tune a car, basics to full dyno session. So we're going to check it out and I'll tell you what I think about it.
What is up, everyone? As you guys know, our main project right now is swapping this Volkswagen 1.T in the E36, and it's coming out absolutely amazing. So we're gonna let this sit for a couple days. I have some things I gotta do and some things I wanna do, and I think you guys will really enjoy this one. As you guys know, I pulled the cherry hatch out of its corner. It's been sitting for many, many years, and this thing needs a proper tune. I got all the rest of the parts back in it so I could drive it, but it needs to be tuned, and I've been seeing a lot of comments lately about the process of tuning and how to do it. So today, in this video, we're gonna do a how to tune your car on a standalone ECU. So before we even plug into this ECU, there's some concepts that we need to talk about so you guys understand what's happening here. You could follow along, and honestly, if you have no care about ever plugging into a computer, that's fine. But this video will really help you guys understand what is actually happening underneath the hood of your car. Our weekly poll, who the hell said no on cheesecake? I don't trust that guy. Have you guys ever noticed? I don't know, we don't film in the shop very often, but we always have a weekly poll going on. I guess this week is cheesecake. So let me do a quick disclaimer for myself, because this is the internet and the internet sucks. So I'm gonna keep this as broad as possible, right? I'm gonna keep this as general as I can, but accurate enough so you guys could really understand what's going on. It doesn't just go over your head. I'm not gonna try and sit here and put a coat on and try to sound like the smart guy that just say words that just most people don't even follow, so they could sound cool, whatever. We're gonna keep it simple. Jordy, come here. We're learning how to tune today. I'm gonna teach you. If I could teach you, I could teach the world.
Nice. Yeah, let me get behind that computer.
Do you know anything that's happening underneath that computer?
I just know that the fuel table has a really cool red to green fade.
Okay.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Right? So what are the two main things?
Air, fuel,
and
spark.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about first. We're going to talk about air-fuel ratio, and we're going to talk about ignition timing, because I know, especially with ignition timing, a lot of people are like, advanced retard? What does that mean?
I can tell you what one of them means.
What is that graph?
Good.
What are your accesses? What are your accesses? Yeah.
Questions?
Air-fuel ratio, also known as stoic, right? You're gonna hear that term stoic from all the fancy people. Oh, what's the stoic? Oh, it's your air fuel ratio. All right, so everyone knows this damn number of 14.7. Jordy, what the hell's 14.7?
It's a magic number, apparently.
There we go. I have it prepped, Jordy. He just came out of the bathroom.
Right? That was good though.
So that's the stoic of pump gas, right? So basically 14.7 parts of air to 1 part of fuel, right? That makes sense. That's like the ideal stoic of pump gas, right? That's the most efficient burn. That's 100% of it, whatever. So chemistry, who cares? What does this number mean? People hyper fixate on this number of 14.7. We'll talk later on about how this will change and where it needs to change. Now, the next big thing is ignition timing. Boom, that's a big one. Not mechanical timing. It gets mixed up with mechanical timing all the time, right? Because when you say if you timed your engine, you can talk about the mechanical timing, which is literally your timing chain, your timing belt, which is the timing of your cams to your crank. This is your ignition timing, which is when your coils are firing compared to TDC, top dead center. Mechanical timing, see, cams, crank gear, how this all aligns with each other. That is mechanical timing, not ignition timing. How does that make sense?
So far, I mean, he's not doing a bad job at explaining it and kind of at breaking it down. We'll see where it goes from here. I'm curious to see what he says more in the lines about the 14.7 stoichiometric efficiency. Because the thing is like most fuel nowadays with E, you can, true stoic is a little bit higher or a little bit lower, like 14.5, 14.4 realistically. But I mean, 14.7, if that's what you're targeting with the AFR gauge, it's going to get you in the ballpark.
This is a big separation. This one blows over people's head all the time. So, and then we have, I'm not an artist, by the way.
Clearly.
All right, whatever. Wow, that's a up piston. I can make it all fancy. A little skirt to it. You like that? Hell yeah. That's the rod should be bent at this part of the, okay, whatever. And this is the head. Well, it go up and it goes down, right? Ignition timing is when this spark plug fires in reference to where the hell the piston is. So as you guys know, the piston will come down and pull that air and fuel into it. It's a piston down, right? And that's what pushes the piston and rotates the engine, which spins the wheels and all that good stuff. So we need to pick the optimal time to ignite that mixture to then send the piston down. And that is what you're doing when you're tuning. You're trying to pick that optimal time to ignite that flame front to then send the piston down. Because the position and the time at which you ignite that mixture is gonna really affect your power band and the safety of your engine. Our optimal ignition timing and our optimal AFR will both change, right? And it changes on this basis of a graph. And this is gonna be our graph, right? This is like the universal graph here. We have engine speed, also known as RPM, and then you'll have your load source. So when it comes to load sources, this is essentially how much air is getting into your cylinder. We'll keep it broad like that. Now there's a couple different load sources that people tune on, right? We're gonna have MAP, which is gonna be like speed density, which is measuring vacuum and boost. Then we have TPS, also known as alpha N, you'll hear that term, which is based off of the position of the TPS, which is commonly used on the ITB cars. And then the OE style, which is gonna be a MAF, which is a mass airflow meter, which is just a direct measurement of airflow.
You couldn't have said it any better, Jim.
Good. No, because I need you guys, because if you guys, okay, theoretically, as you know, engine RPM increases, you know, the load source increases, right? That's what we could assume, right? Because engine speed picks up, we're able to get more air, or they work with each other. You get more air into it, the engine speed is able to pick up, and it keeps going, right? What we have to worry about is how our AFR and our ignition timing is changing throughout this transient experience through the pull. We'll say through the pull. As your engine speed increases and your load source increases, these numbers are going to change, and tuning is basically picking the most optimal numbers for both of these situations that are both optimal for power and optimal for safety.
Gotcha.
And that's tuning, right? That's tuning that's dyno tuning, that's full throttle tuning. The hard part about tuning is there's so much more beyond that. There's drivability, there's cold start, there's hot start, there's cruising, there's partial throttle, there's all of that stuff in between, but we're gonna be focusing on the optimization of these two, on making power, on the dyno. Well, let's figure out how to optimize these two things.
Something else is
Jim,
very
what's
important that
what's the advantage?
he probably, we'll see if he addresses it, but something that also is very important is you want to verify what your injectors are doing, because your injectors also have their own timing, okay? So typically you'll have injector timing settings before TDC or after TDC settings, and essentially like when you want, if you're doing a port injection engine, which is anything that has injectors in a rail, basically that's not directly in the cylinder, the way you want it to be implemented is low idle states and things like that. You want it to be kind of late. So you want your injection phasing to be kind of as late as possible, so you're not pulling a bunch of fuel up on the intake valves and things like that, or having excess fuel in the intake of any kind, because it's just going to make it run rich. And there's no need to really cool the valves off like that, but as you increase in RPM, you can actually make your injector phase a lot sooner, right? So that injector timing is going to give it time for two things: atomization, and you're cooling off your intake valves. So you want to set that a lot sooner in the phase during this process. But like I said, I'm cutting this guy off a little bit short. He may even bring it up later. We'll see what happens.
Advanced retard thing that you were talking about.
You should know all about that. all right. Let's talk about ignition timing and what's happening here, right? So we have our compression stroke, right? This is the air and fuel has already come in. It's going to compress it. Then we have the TDC, which is the piston at the very top, and then we have our combustion cycle. Jordy told me to do that. So at TDC, this will be 0, right? That's our 0 timing mark. When we go towards the combustion stroke, we're gonna go into the retard state. And then when we go before the final compression, this will be advanced. The more we go before top dead center, that's advancing the timing, the more we go this way, right? Or after, it's the retard. Anywhere moving in this direction is retard, anywhere moving in the opposite direction is advanced. You guys could nitpick me all you want. There's a bunch of keyboard tuners in there. You can get way more in depth with all these concepts, but I'm trying to keep it as broad as possible. You guys can understand how it all works. The flame front needs to start activating, right? It takes time. It takes time for the reaction to happen. So if you ignite it, that flame needs to build. It needs to hit all the molecules and start reacting through the entire mixture, which takes time. And you want to start activating that before you get to the top. But the problem is you don't want to activate it too early, because if you activate it too early, guess what? That flame's going to go off, and it's going to go off before you hit TDC, and it's going to want to kick the engine backwards. Combustion is going to work in the...
This guy is actually doing a really good job of describing this. This is a concept I try to like teach people and tell them all the time in regards to like what timing is actually doing and how it affects an engine. Some fuels, you know, they want timing, a lot more timing, because the flash of the fuel, which is the rate at which it can combust, is way slower. In some fuels, it's way faster. So, you know, a faster burning fuel is going to want less timing. A slower burning fuel you can have more timing, basically.
Wrong direction. Does that make sense?
Inefficient.
You want the combustion to happen at the peak time that the reaction has the most amount of energy in the downward stroke. The more efficient you can combust that mixture, the more it's going to push down that piston and produce more power. So the problem is here that there is a million different factors that affect the time at which we want to ignite our mixture. Airflow, air temp, fuel temp, compression ratio, cylinder size, piston shape. It all dictates where the optimal time is to ignite this mixture in the terms of being safe and producing a lot of power. That being said, this is where the dyno actually comes in hand. Dyno, right? Everyone knows the dyno is used to measure horsepower. And what we are using this tool actually for is to not only simulate our road conditions, our pool conditions, but we're gonna use this as our, well, reference for gains and losses. With each pool, we can make different changes and we can see how it affects the power band, if it affects it for the good, if it affects it for the bad, and we will use that data to then adjust our tunes. That's why we always say, like, sometimes the numbers aren't really important. It's more or less the comparable data between runs.
So this is something too, is like people get way too caught up in, oh, what kind of horsepower did your car make on the dyno and yada yada yada. It's like reality, you just need baseline numbers compared to like your before and your after, and you're getting a good result. the best way to go about, honestly, is like any of these dynos, you just turn off the corrected values and ignore DA and everything like that, and you're just going to see the actual number the car is making and putting down. You make your adjustments and you're going to see the final number. You know, not everyone is going to want that. Not every customer is going to like that because they can't see like, oh, this big number or this big power number that the car is going to make. But at the end of the day, it's like, once your car, you have it dialed in for the combination you set up and you're at maximum efficiency, none of it matters anymore. Like, the customer's going to get the car, and regardless, it's going to be performing in most cases to the best of its abilities on whatever setup they have. And a car that's properly dialed in through every curve, every throttle load, it's going to be responsive. So eventually they won't care as much about the number it's going to make, because it doesn't really matter. You know, it's just a number. It's just a dyno is just a tool we use to find all of the power in a vehicle and do it safely versus doing it on the street.
Base map is a whole system in itself. We've done videos on that in the past. A lot of guys can kind of bobble through that. You set up your, you set up your sensors, you go through that. You see the power making aspect of it. To start off with, we have a four-cylinder turbo. Tuning turbo engines is a lot more fun than the average engine. Like NA engines might be rewarding to some people, but turbo engines are fun because once you turn up the boost, you make a lot more power. What we have here is a S13 SR20, completely stock engine. It has some...
So side note, I can recognize someone that has a problem when I see it, and he's kind of like me, just addicted to boost. It just makes him happy inside, you know, smiles per gallon.
Some pond cams in it, some drop-in cams. We have an upgraded Disco Potato Turbo. It's like a GT28 something or other. I don't even know what's on here, to be honest. And we are controlling this by a Link ECU. Okay, so here's the thing, right? We want to advance the ignition timing as much as we can, because as we advance the timing, we will produce more power. To a certain extent, right? Because there's a graph here, right? If we do this, we'll do advanced. So as we advance it, we will produce more torque, right? Horsepower is just a function of torque. We'll just say torque. The more we advance it, the more power we will produce. Obviously, too much of a good thing is bad, and it starts to then hinder power. We are looking for this moment where we produce the most amount of where we produce the most amount of torque per ignition advance, right? And this is called, I think they call it MPT. I think that's the
What does that stand for?
most power per torque, I think.
Per pork.
Per pork, I think. NPT is what they call it, right? So this is the peak point. Here's the problem. We have engine knock, pinging, detonation, whatever you want to call it. It is the killer of engines. There's some million ways to kill engines, but we got to worry about making too much power that the internals can't hold up to it physically. And we got to make sure that we also are not creating knock, detonation, ping, whatever you want to call it, that is going to actually rattle the engine and break the piston, smush the bearing, bend the rod, whatever. That's the hard part, because a lot of times, most of the time, especially on pump gas, we will be getting into that knock range way before we get to that NPT range. As we advance the timing, we are igniting this earlier and earlier in the stroke. The earlier we do it, the more chances we could of that flame actually acting against us, right? Because we want the flame to push the piston down in the stroke. But if it pushes against the piston on the upstroke, guess what? Now you have two forces fighting each other and stuff's gonna break. So we gotta make sure we avoid that at all costs. You guys have noticed that we love tuning on ethanol around here. The nice thing about ethanol is it's a very stable fuel. The chances of it knocking is gonna be dramatically lower than pump gas. Now the reason why I'm able to say that we can make more power on ethanol most of the time is because we could push a little bit farther, because we're not stressed about hitting that wall of knock before we get to that peak power range. Pump gas is scary because it's more volatile, it's more sensitive, it's less stable. And so the chances of knocking on pump gas is way higher. So you have to be way more mindful of what you're doing when it comes to AFR and ignition timing because of that reason. And that's the whole point of octanes. Like you guys have seen 87 octane, 88 octane, 91, Sunoco's 94, and then the European guys, they get like 99 to like 102. It's like the same thing, it's a different scale. It's not actually higher octane, it's a different scale, all right? Because you're gonna get all those guys like, oh, I have 99 at my pump. It's just a different scale. They're the same. So the higher the octane, the more stable the fuel is. That's why the high-end cars, the engines that are factory high compression, the engines that are factory turbo, they
call for 93 or above.
They call for 93, right? Because if your engine starts seeing knock, which you will on low octane fuel, it's going to pull a bunch of timing and it's going to take a bunch of power out of your car. So like if you can get yourself something good like a Sunoco 94, your chances of knock drop dramatically and you can have a safer, higher power level.
Way higher efficiency.
Just from the pump itself by just spending an extra couple of bucks at the pump. So if your car is on pump gas and you have the opportunity to stop at a Sunoco station and get 94 octane, it is worth the peace of mind. Right now on the dyno, we have 94 octane in this thing, so I'm able to lean on it a little bit more while having a lot more confidence. So now that we've yapped a bunch, we have our basis set, we have the general idea. Now it's time to plug into the computer and start setting up for our tune. All right, boys, so you just plugged into your standalone for the first time. I don't care if you have a Haltech, a Link, ECU Masters, a Motec, I don't know. We're gonna be looking at our two main things right now. That's gonna be our fuel table and our ignition table. And like we talked about before, we have our axis that is load on the left. You see it? Manifold absolute pressure. So we will be on speed density, so we'll be measuring vacuum and boost. And then we have our RPM, which is on the top here, or on the bottom, depending on how you set it set up. And so we're gonna have load versus RPM. That is the same between ignition table and your fueling table. This is the hard part, because I could talk about this for setting up a table for 10 minutes straight. Like, maybe we should do like an hour and a half video next time.
We probably could easily.
I'm just hoping that the general car guy isn't looking at this and going, it's above my head, I don't want it. You know, I'm trying to keep this simple so you guys can actually learn what's happening. And so, one, if you want to give it a shot yourself, you have a foundation to build off of. Or two,
you want to sound smart to your buddies.
You want to sound smart to your friends, most importantly. Oh yeah, ignition, advance that bitch, like. Or just want to help follow along when your car is a dyno and your tuner is doing this thing. So obviously your load axis, you want to set up in a range that is real. You want to make sure that you are within enough vacuum, because your engine pulls vacuum at idle, that you're in that idle and cruising conditions. And then you want to make sure that it's high enough that you're not boosting or producing more load beyond the map, right? This car will not be over 20 psi, so we have our fuel table at 19 psi. That'll keep us in that range. And of course, this thing will be revving to 7,500 RPM. So this thing will probably set it up to go to 8,000. That's all simple stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this is the tricky part. How do I start off? We see all these numbers here, right? Our ignition table is easy. It's straightforward. This number right here is your ignition timing. If it's a positive number, it's advanced. If it's a negative number, it's retard. So down here we have, you see this big lump of 31. That's 31 degrees before top dead center. Now when it comes to the fuel table, this could be a little bit tricky for some people's brain to wrap around, but we can make it simple for you. Now this number is a little different between every ECU, because every ECU does do it a little bit differently, but overall on the most modern ECU, it's set up to be your VE, the volumetric efficiency, right? So this is the theoretical volumetric efficiency of your engine. As you guys know, as load increases, RPM increases, there's points in the combustion that the engine is being more efficient. Your RPM increases, your load increases, the fuel requirements increase. And so this number will increase. We'll kind of dumb it down there. We found out where the car wants to idle, right? The AFRs are clean. By clean, I'm gonna say it's between 12 and 15. So let's think about this. Let's use our brains, right? Because you're a lot smarter than you think. I truly think people are a lot smarter than they think.
Before he does anything, I'm curious to where he's going to set up his VE table. So like as a good base reference, the biggest thing that people don't do correctly is injector dead times. And I've seen this so many times, it's crazy. And you can't always rely on the factory manufacturer to give you the exact correct data for your application either. You're going to have one vehicle that's going to want a little bit less dead time, and one vehicle on the 7 injectors is going to want a little bit more dead time, okay? And dead time is basically just the delay of the injector pulse in relation to your harness. Like your harness, if you have a longer harness, your dead times are going to be different than some guy with a shorter harness. It's very minor, very, very minor, but it is going to affect the outcome. But what I'm getting at is when you're setting up your VE table, like let's say at idle, you're seeing higher than 40 VE in your idle zone. Most times, heck, let's give it a higher number. Let's say you're setting it and you're getting your base VE and it's 60 VE, right? 60% at idle. well, off the bat, you're going to know, well, man, my engine's not really 60% efficient at idle. That's just not a thing. And that's when you know immediately. It doesn't matter what you see you're tuning. You know, oh, my injector dead times are going to be off a little bit. You know, and you can adjust, scale them up or scale them down a few percent here and there to get it back in range. So essentially, the more dead time you add is going to add more fuel, right? The less dead time you have is going to want more fuel. So you're taking away fuel when pulling dead time, adding fuel when you're giving it more dead time on any injector setup. So for example, if you're starting off and you're tuning your car initially and you're seeing, oh, it's running, it wants 60 VE at idle to be in a stoichiometric efficiency ratio, like you're gonna be like, I could probably add 2 or 3% to that entire dead time table to scale it back, so it's gonna add more fuel, and then it's gonna bring that VE target down at idle. So you'll be like 30s, 40s, anywhere between like 20 and 40 is really good. I mean, if you really want to get down to nitty gritty, I've seen people get it down like 15, 20%. But between 20 and 40 is a really great place to start off at, which it looks like he's starting off in the 40s on his idle. Another thing is, like, when you get into boost, like once you're really close within that range, I can almost guarantee you, when you're starting off, if you go at the top end of your VE where it's like higher RPM and you're in boost, like a good base starting point is set those high load zones. Let's start it off, make it rich. Start off at like 120%, 125% VE and let you work yourself down, because you're not really going to hurt a motor by having it too rich in most cases. I mean, you can hydrolock, right? But that's like very extreme. But in most cases, you need to start rich and dial it back, pull the fuel back out of it, and see where it goes from there. So I'm curious, I only pause this video because I want to see if he makes an adjustment in that VE before he even starts to make a pull, or is this guy going to let it go lean and then add fuel slowly? Let's see what he does for his process. Everyone's process is different. There's no like exact right method, but my method is always make it fat and then dial it back.
I think they just are like, no, that sounds like I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to understand it, right? I think that's pretty fair, objective. Yeah. If you try to think things out, you're a lot smarter than you think. Think about it, right? Idle conditions, boy.
800 to 1,000.
Perfect. 800 to 1,000. So here, right? 800 to 1,000. Where is our load source going to be? It's going to be at the lowest point. And that's going to be either, if you're on a MAF or alpha N, it's going to basically be the lowest number, TPS, basically 0. Or if you're in speed density or a map, right? If you use a map sensor, you're going to be in vacuum, because engines pull vacuum at idle most. Okay, 800 to 1,000 and bring it down, right? So we're going to be idling in this area. That logically all makes sense, right? Now this you could just figure out with the car just idling. It's not stressful. You're not going to hurt your car idling unless the thing's basically misfiring from too much fuel. You're not going to hurt it. You can lean it out. It don't matter. It's going to run like shit. But let's just start from 0. In this area we have 38, right? 38. Whole map's 38. So obviously this will be our lowest fuel needs at idle. There's the least amount of load on the engine. It's just chilling. It needs enough just to run. So obviously we're going to need more fuel everywhere else. Now let's think about where it's going to need the most fuel.
At redline.
Not at redline. See, this is the thing.
Really?
At peak torque.
Okay.
At peak torque, right? And so, from someone who's been around this a little bit, where do engines usually tend to make the most amount of peak torque?
I would assume 4,200.
Okay. That's a good guess. So depending on your turbo size, right, how quickly the turbo spools in, it's going to vary a little bit, but on a turbo 4-cylinder, you're going to be around probably 4,000 to 5,000. We will go over here and peak boost, right, because the more boost we have, the more air in the cylinder, the more fuel we're going to need, and then at peak torque, this will probably be our highest number. So we'll double it for now, right? It's arbitrary. We might need more, but we're going to set up this shape, whatever. We now know our lowest and we know our highest. And well, this next section is kind of where experience comes in, or you could even just use common sense, but what the hell is common sense, honestly? And this will help kind of dictate the shape of our graft. And depending on what kind of engine, what camshafts, what turbo you have, it will be different, but the general mild camshaft turbo engine, which is going to be 80% of the people here, it'll be the rough of the same shape. So here's a cheat code for the new guys. Right, there are a lot of maps out there. You can get them on the internet. Don't don't just put them in your car and just go do pulls. But they'll give you a reference, and even if we go on to link startup calibrations, that will give us some type of baseline to work off of and give us somewhat of like a general shape. It's a little bit of a cheat code. Like when I first started tuning, I started off with the general concepts, and I started off with looking at base maps and just experimenting and see what we can get away with, right? With that, you could take yourself pretty far. So let's open up like a baseline calibration. Let's use a JZX one. How about that? We'll use a JZX base map from Blink. We're gonna look at our field table. If we look at our generic base map from Blink for the JZX, which is a turbo, it's not a 4-cylinder, it's a turbo engine, you could see, look, our peak torque and our highest numbers are in the same area. Follow the same concept, and then in our idle conditions, it's the lowest numbers. Essentially, as you could tell, this graph kind of builds out towards that. You know, one of the biggest things that stuck with me was from Derek from Bootleg Tuning. He made a good point. An engine should always work in a fluid, organic motion, right? There's no erraticness to it. Your load comes in very organic and fluid. Your RPM comes in very fluid. The air going in, the fuel coming in, it all works in this smooth motion. There should be no erraticness to it. And that being said, your fuel table, which is your VE, your volumetric efficient table, should follow suit. And there's a reason why you'll see tables like this. Like you'll see your tuner kind of like spinning this thing around, and this is just the 3D model of our graph. And so this puts it into a visible image that we could see, and as you could tell, it's smooth. It's supposed to be smooth. It's supposed to be this gradual climb, this gradual hill. And if it doesn't look like this, then you have something wrong. And that's what I see a lot with new tuners or DIY tuners versus OG tuners. OG tuners will reference their 3D table to make sure it all works in this fluent motion, because that's how it should work. If your AFRs are spot on and this thing looks crazy, there's something mechanically wrong. If everything works mechanically perfect and it doesn't look like this, then your tune's wrong. Your tune's inefficient, it's erratic, it doesn't make sense. And so that's why you'll see a lot of guys reference this table. Your efficiency of your engine should be this
Gradual smooth motion.
This gradual smooth motion. So this is idle conditions and this peak torque, and it should have this gradual climb to it, just like a graph. I mean, like watch this. Like, let's just randomly say, I'll see a lot of new tuners do stuff like this where there's clusters. You open up your 3D model and then look at that. Does that look right?
No.
Does that look like a fluid motion? And that's why you can kind of use, look at that. That tells you something's wrong. Obviously, it's a little distorted because it's meant to show you that something's wrong. We have our general base of our fuel map, and so let's use this as like a reference, right? So, okay, double increase. So we'll come back to our map. You're never in this range. This doesn't matter, right? You're never here. So this is the tuner cheat code right here, interpolation. Now, what is interpolation? It's kind of like, the broadest way of putting it is it's kind of like a bridge of average, a smoothing between 2 points. That's probably the easiest way to put it. So this is a horizontal plane, so we'll do interpolate horizontally, right? See how it creates this nice blend for us? So we will use that right here. Interpolate. We'll do a vertical. Interpolate. Look at this, dude. We are making a fuel map. We probably decrease from peak torque, right? And then look at that. That looks kind of like something, doesn't it? You see what we're working with? Has that nice gradual curve. And obviously this is so far off from where we need to be, but this will give us a baseline, and then we're gonna use our dyno to actually get this thing locked in. We've learned a lot before even doing a pull, but you need to know it. Where'd you go? You fucking skipped class.
There's
You got
definitely
the
a lot
tension,
more
brother.
than just using interpolate.
Tires after work.
Good base map, but
We have to now
it's just the
talk about
basics. We'll see what happens.
kind of the similar thing, ignition timing. And this is the scary part, right? Because anyone could do pulls on the road and adjust these numbers until the AFRs make sense. The big things that separates a new tuner and an old tuner is going to be the attack on the timing table. So what the hell do we do for ignition timing? Where do we even start? This is a scary thing, and this is one of those things that we can talk about for hours. There's so many variables too, but we're going to keep this nice and simple. So as simple as we can. Our idle conditions, this will be obviously the bottom left like we talked about. Can we see this on the thing? So when you're picking an idle ignition timing, this number is going to be basically anywhere from 10 to 25. You're not going to hurt your engine idling with ignition timing. Like, honestly, you're not going to hurt it. So play around with it. here's the thing. You just want your engine to idle efficiently. The more we advance the timing, the more power the engine makes at idle, and it's gonna idle it stronger and at a higher RPM. But the same concept works in reverse. Say the engine sounds like it's too efficient at idle, and you want it to idle down a little bit, we can actually retard it. You know, we can go from 20, we can go to 10, we take 10 degrees out of it. We're getting closer to the top of that stroke, and it won't idle as efficiently, which will allow it to idle at a lower RPM. And that's kind of like a general way of doing it. I like to be somewhere between 18, like 15 and 18. So I'm just gonna put 18, right? Some engines are more efficient than others at idle. Think about like higher compression, different camshafts, all of that.
So next thing is, I'm curious if he's gonna show you guys that, so the best way to get a good idle on a standalone ECU or just any form of tuning at all is wherever the car is idling at, you want all the cells around it to kind of be static in the same range. That way it's not hunting, because if your timing is sweeping, it's going up and down, it's going to cause surging, it's going to cause a bunch of annoyances. And that same thing also applies to the V-table. So wherever that car wants to idle at, in its zones, like after it's warmed up and things like that, those cells around it, you know, they should all be pretty close to each other, but within like the cells where it's idling, you want them to all kind of be like the same exact static number. And I promise you, if you just follow that little concept, you're going to get the best running and idling cars that you've ever seen.
Now, if we go into this condition right here, so our bottom right, this is going to be higher RPM but no load. And that's going to be our revving condition. That's going to be like your clutch is in your whatever, right?
Starting to overheat a little bit, trying to keep everything flowing.
See, he knows. So once again, there's no load on the engine. You're not really in a danger zone of knock, right? Since there's not really a lot happening in the chamber, it's not under a lot of stress, it's going to treat you good, and you don't really got to worry about knock. So here's the thing. OEs and a lot of people, you want to put a lot of timing in it because you want your engine to be efficient in that zone, because you want it to be snappy, you want it to feel good, you want it to be quick. And so a lot of OEs will go anywhere from 25 degrees all the way up to even, I've seen 50 on some OEMs, which is crazy. So we're going to put this in a general consensus of 35 degrees, and then we're just going to blend it out, right? This is just generic tuning. So, now we're in the scary condition, and that is above atmospheric pressure. This is within boost. Right, so this is turbo car stuff. This is where it all matters.
So I'm gonna say, like in most cars, especially like a low compression application like this SR probably is in factory config, 35 degrees coming off throttle, where the engine's never gonna be under a load. 35 isn't gonna be enough in a lot of cases. So what'll happen is, depending on how you have your fuel cut set up, when you left the throttle, if you don't have fuel cut set up, it's gonna toss fuel out of the exhaust cylinder. You're gonna get some pops and some bangs and things like that. Pretty minor, but you are gonna hear it on decel.
Because as the boost increases, the load increases, the chances of detonation increase dramatically. Where does the engine make the most? Be our biggest danger zone, but we could use some general rule of thumbs, stuff that does come with experience, or stuff that just comes with having ample information on drivetrains like Miatas. There's so much information on tuning Miatas online that you could start somewhere, okay? The general rule of thumb, depending on who you're talking to, is usually around retarding the timing 1 degree per PSI. All right, we could use that as a general rule of thumb. That's not the case all around, but it'll get you started. So what I wanna do is I wanna start somewhere around 25 degrees, all right? And then we'll just blend it, all right? See that? And then we'll just fucking do one of these, smooth it all out, right? Because just like the fuel table, this should be a fluent motion. This shouldn't have any erraticness inside of it. So we will pull 20, right? So that's 20 PSI. We'll pull 20 out of it. This is a very aggressive pull.
Yeah.
This is going to be our general baseline for an ignition table following general ideas. And now we are going to use this dyno to get the information we need to optimize this graph. This is actually like, that's actually pretty, that looks very SR-y actually. This might not be super far off. So, all right. Time to do some tuning. I forgot
So
to
like a good rule of thumb is like when you get into boost, a good rule of thumb is a good timing to target. Like say you're just getting into tuning it in boost, and you definitely don't want to hurt anything. If you're below, like, you need to see what your turbo is going to do to make sure you have your wastegate set up correctly and everything like that, to make sure it's not going to overboost. But a really good place to be hitting and timing, like as you're starting off, just trying to make sure your fuel is perfect initially, 8 degrees. I mean, you can put 8 degrees in it at 1 to 15 pounds of boost, and realistically, you're never going to hurt an engine, and that applies to pretty much all engines, even if they're not meant for boost. Like you can do that with LSs, you can do that with SRs, VQs, 2JZs. Like, start soft, like, because if you follow his technique, it may work for you, right? But kind of the 1 pound of boost per 1 degree of timing, that in theory, it's just a theory. It doesn't really work. Because if you set it up like that, and sometimes, and you're not a familiar tuner and you're a new guy, you're going to blow an engine up. Because that timing, you may hit a zone where it's, you know, it may be 15 degrees, 20 degrees, 25 degrees. You know what I mean? Like as you're first getting into boost and your fuel isn't correct, and then boom, you just blew a motor. So be way more conservative with your timing when you're initially starting. Give it like, you know, anywhere between 5 and 10 degrees just to get comfortable as you're dialing in the fuel, and then you can turn the timing up after.
Talk about what the target for air fuel ratio. This one will be quick, all right? Jordy, what do we target for AFRs?
14.7.
It's the magic number, right?
That's big brother. All right. What we have here is like our other graphs. We have RPM versus load source. This is an absolute, so right here is when we get into boost. 14 point, we break an atmosphere. Okay, so target AFRs can be argued up and down, left and right. Depends on everyone's tuning style, what the car's for, road use. We're all racing, drifting. It doesn't matter. Everyone has their own concepts, but I'm going to give you a general idea here. So, in idle and cruising conditions, 14.7 is ideal. The perfect stoic. The revving, the idle, and the cruising, which is going to be all in these conditions, right? Which is RPM basically with very little load in it. We could assume that 14.7 is our ideal condition. That being said, sometimes, depending on your engine setup, it might want less. Big ass cam in it, it's a V8, it might want 15.5 in those conditions. If it's an inefficient head with some whatever in it, it might want 12.5, which is fine. You're not gonna hurt it with that. Your fuel economy might be a little shit. It is what it is. You just wanna make sure you're not like buried in the 10s, buried in the 11s in these conditions, because then you're just putting excess fuel in your system, potentially washing your cylinders, whatever, and you're just wasting fuel for no reason. Big thing is in the boost conditions. Above 0 PSI, we're gonna wanna target somewhere in the 11s. I'm gonna keep that broad. This is on pump gas. This will change with your fuel on pump gas. We could say 11.5. 11.5 is like industry standard, all right? That's within modern boost limitations. If you increase boost and your cylinder pressures get really high, you're gonna wanna probably richen it up a little bit. I've seen some guys even target 11.8, 12 on pump gas, but that is up to them. This is where there's going to be a balance of ignition timing and fuel, because the big thing that we are using that rich condition for, because you're probably like, dude, why don't you just use 14.7? Lean is mean, brother. Right? You've heard that?
Sounds like that thing's gonna blow up.
A lot of the time we are using the fuel to cool down the cylinder and make this combustion.
You definitely want it to be richer, but just to give you a better example, like say you have a factory Mitsubishi Evo, right? That factory map is going to be so rich under high boost levels. So if you're like one of the guys, you get an Evo and you put a boost controller on it and you want to turn it up, once it gets into those higher airflow ratios in an Evo, the factory fueling is going to target something like 10.0 to 9.8. They just want to throw so much fuel at it that it's going to like basically fall on its face and not blow up. So that's another rule that you can use as well. Like in his table, the way he's setting it up, if you wanted to, you always want to have cells that are going to be above and beyond of what you're actually going to do under boost. That way, in case you have a boost creep situation or your boost controller fails and you go out of control, you want to put more fuel in it. You want to put enough fuel in it where it's going to bog and fall on its face if your boost cut doesn't work. It's just another safety. Every aftermarket ECU has safeties you can apply to them, but it's really up to you to know how to use them and when to use them. But on pump gas, if you just want to be really, really safe, like there's nothing wrong with going a little bit richer. I mean, you can target 11, you can target 10.5. It's not going to hurt the engine. If anything, it's just you're not going to make any power, right? But you're not going to hurt it at the same time. So like he's also right. I've seen a lot of people, they'll tune it a little leaner, they'll tune it into the 12s, but the downside of going that lean is you're taking cooling, you're taking safety out of the mix, and especially on a vehicle like say you're in you're tuning a rally car, right, where it's going to be under lots of load all the time, constantly, you're just abusing it. You have to have it rich, and you need to have a little bit less timing because that heat soak on the motor is going to make a difference. That may be a load you will never see on a dyno, is just constant stress nonstop from longer distances. So giving a little extra fuel and a little bit less timing in those situations will save you. It will save a motor, because you could tune a car on the dyno, right, that is something out of you can get a car completely dialed in on the dyno for like a rally car or track cars. We're not really talking drag cars as much because it's a similar situation on a dyno. But when you're under a high load, like long events, you need to tune the car even safer.
A little bit safer to make it less sensitive and to make it not detonate on us, because what are we going to be fighting the entire time? That is detonation or knocking. If your turbo's super small, if the compression's higher, you might want to more fuel mass and cooling capabilities. This is a drift, we'll say it's a drift car, so I'm going to target 11.2. Some people might hate that. Some guys even target richer. We'll just kind of blend it in the transients, all right? Now let's start doing some pulls, finally, all right? Now that you guys know how to tune, you got this. I just taught you how to do this.
For sure, yeah. I'm just gonna put numbers in and hope it works.
This thing's smoking a lot, huh?
We're also talking mad shit about the blow-up valve. You got one on this.
I was gonna say, like, it's been a big blow-off valve season, hasn't it? Is this turbo finally let go? It's old.
Disco potato got cooked.
Oh, man. All right. So, before we start doing a pull, watch our tracer right here. This is telling us where it's pulling from the data right here. This is on our fuel table. So we have low load, low RPM. As I rev it up, you're gonna see it's still low load, but the RPM increases. So you just wanna make sure your AFRs are clean in that revving condition before you start doing anything. It'll kind of help you get an idea of the way the map looks. So if you look at our AFR gauge right here, it shows that it gets a little lean at the higher RPM, so we can kind of just clean this up on the bottom real quick. And a general consensus, we'll put about 4% more fuel in it. We'll just do a quick blend, and we'll try that one more time. All right, so we have a basis for an ignition table. We're gonna start there. Now with the fueling, it's as simple as basically changing these numbers on the graph to make sure we get our desired AFR, which is what we talked about prior. I'm gonna do a couple half pulls and see how it transits into them. First pull, we're gonna start on wastegate. It's not making a lot of boost. It's probably gonna be around 10 PSI, 12 PSI. We wanna make sure the fueling is in a safe range. It doesn't have to be perfect. We wanna make sure it's basically a little bit, it's at least above 10 and below, in this range, I'd say like 12.2. If you see it any richer, any leaner, lift and adjust accordingly. We're gonna do a pull real quick, going off our theoretical map, and we're gonna be staring at that AFR gauge. That was actually pretty spot on, wasn't it? I was looking at through the camera, but like, that's funny. We're not super far off our theoretical, which is like a win. Most of the time you'll be quite off, and you're gonna have to adjust accordingly. This is a very simple setup that we've done a million times. And so here we go. We got our first baseline, and then let's see what she did. So now let's look at all the information we got. We logged on the computer, which I should have said before I did the pull. This is our log. This is very simplistic. We can plot all our data here, or we have access to it all on the side. Link's logging software is really freaking nice because it logs everything the ECU sees. So if there's some information you're looking for, from pulse width to activation of accessories to ignition timing to AFRs to anything you need, you're gonna have it. This is what we're gonna see what the car did under the pull, and the dyno is gonna show us the outputted results. Pretty solid power band for a 2-liter turbo. Right, the torque increases with boost, holds it pretty good, and then falls off as the head becomes inefficient. With that, the power increases. It's a nice linear line. We made 292 horsepower and 264 pounds of torque. First pull. We got really lucky on that one because the AFRs were super clean. As you guys saw, once we got in the boost, we were in that 11.5 range. It did get a little leaner, it did get a little richer, and then this is where we're gonna make our adjustments. So we look at our log. You could see, we could look at our boost. So we'll go boost increase pretty linearly. It's not the most aggressive spool ever. Yeah, this turbo kind of sucks. I think it's hurt or you have a boost leak or something, because usually you're gonna want to see boost kind of ramp and level off. But this mimics our power band, right? On turbo cars, the power band and the boost curve is gonna be very similar, because obviously as you make more boost, you're gonna make more power. Now this is where we're gonna make our adjustments. So before I touch my ignition table, since I know we're not super far away, I'm gonna be playing with my fueling. Go to our fuel table right here. We're gonna open it up, and as you can see, this will actually trace the pull. You see how it traces it? It actually shows you what cells were hit during a pull, because obviously it's not gonna touch all of them. It's only gonna touch the cells.
So just as a heads up, like as an informational, there's other software you can use out there to help speed up this whole process. Megalog Viewer HD is a great tool to have. It's a great tool to use, because you can build up what's called a histogram, which is basically your cell matrix, like what he's showing you right there. You can build a custom cell matrix. You can target your PIDs that you want for your fueling, right? So you can do things like a real basic one, like say you're tuning a really basic ECU that doesn't have the ability to do short-term or long-term fuel trims. You can take your target air-fuel ratio versus actual air-fuel ratio and convert that into a percentage math equation. So it's like your output will be, this is what my target is, right? And you want your target air-fuel ratio to be the number that determines the percentage of change based on your actual air-fuel ratio. I don't even like tuning an AFR. I tune Lambda because Lambda is just better all around. Once you learn what Lambda is and how it functions, it's way safer to tune in Lambda. But anyways, if he literally just had a custom, like a secondary software set up, and I've tuned some Link stuff, I'm not super familiar in all of the Link terminology. They may have those features built in modern Link hardware, which I'm sure they do, almost everyone does. But you can take those percentage changes and apply them straight to the table, make quick, easy changes. You know, you can get a car really close to ballpark in maybe 4 or 5 pulls and get the fueling really good, and it's going to save time. If you manually go over every single cell that's out of range by percentage, it's going to take a long time. And another downside is, like, he's tuning in AFR. If you're tuning in Lambda, you can think of the stoic value of 1, right, is 100%, right? You're 100% at the burn rate. So if your car's running, it's a little lean, right? So say you're at like a 103 lambda and you're targeting a 1 lambda, you can add 3%, right? So you can add 3%, and then if it's like you're targeting 1 and you're seeing 1 lambda, you can add 10% of fuel in those zones. So you can do the cell tracing a little bit more efficiently with a log if you know how to tune in lambda. And the same logic also applies if you're rich. So if you're tuning for a 1 stoic value and you're seeing 7.9, you know what I mean, like in light zones, now you know, oh, I need to pull out 21% fuel, and you don't even have to pull out the full 21%. You can pull like 18%, you know what I mean. But you'll know off the top of your head very quickly if you tune in lambda. It just makes it easier.
Actually used under the conditions. I mean, 80% of these graphs you don't touch ever. Really, it's going to be kind of in a pull, it's going to be something along the lines of this. See how he does that. So we could see the zones
right,
where we went, and then we could adjust those zones accordingly. We did our first pull very old school. The wideband is not communicating to the ECU. We weren't able to record the wideband data and plot it against our log, which allows us to adjust it very easily. We did it old school, baby. We looked at the AFR gauge. This is how a lot of tuners did stuff for a long time. Dude, we've been on the dyno with, I've seen Derek do it, I've seen Jimmy do it, where you record the AFR gauge with your iPhone and play it back. We're adults here, so let's put our AM wideband into our Link ECU.
There you go.
She's wired in.
So that's part of it.
Now we got the wideband actually talking to the ECU, so we can log this, and it'll make tuning a heck of a lot easier. So now this will make your life a lot easier because we could just look at the log. So right here, what I have plotted is, of course, RPM, because that's going to be our main reference. And we have boost on top. Those are our two main references, right? Those are our two axes. If you look, we're going to have target AFR, which is that stable looking line. Plot that against actual AFR. And that will tell us how much we need to adjust it. Since we know what our target is, we don't got to think, right? Because if we pull up our graph, because if you look at any point on the graph, you see how for this split, for halfway through the pull, we're basically on target, which is really nice, right on top of the line. But you could see it falls beyond target, which means it's going richer. And up here, it's above target, which means it's on the lean side. Using that information, it makes it really easy to adjust our fuel table. We could watch our cursor. So if you see it down here in our fuel table, now that is the 3 columns that we were now lean on. So we'll take this and we look,
like you can convert,
and look at this point,
you can convert most logs into a CSV output that you can use in anything. Like a CSV can be opened with like Excel spreadsheets and things like that, and you can plot over time all of your data points. But like I said, Megalog Viewer HD is a great tool to have, and in certain ECMs like Haltech, like that's my favorite ECU to tune. I have custom software that makes it easy just to literally copy your whole cell matrix for your fuel, your timing. You can make custom histograms, throw it in my software, upload your CSV log into it, and then as you do that, it's going to show you, look, I need to make these fuel changes, and you can do that. And I have custom specialized smoothing tables that'll make it even faster to do tuning with.
We're about 15% off.
Too, and also,
so this is everyone's
ECU
everyone's
masters.
styles differently, right? So we're gonna keep it on the light side because that's 15% a lot. So we'll do 12%. It should hopefully clean this gap up right here. So with our changes, we should get this a lot closer to target. So look at that. Look how close we are to target the entire time. See? So when it comes to actually creating your fuel table, it's such an easy concept, right? You're looking at your AFRs, what they should be and what they are, and you're just changing the number to accommodate for a higher number, more fuel, less number, less fuel. It's as simple as that. Now, the finesse comes with just doing it over time. You get a little erratic when you first start doing it, but it's as simple as that. And if it starts to get out of range, just shut down. Make your adjustments and go from there. Bro, you're late to class.
What?
We're teaching them how to tune today.
No way.
I'm trying my hardest to say as least as possible so this video is not 4 hours long.
Did you give a disclaimer that if you guys blow up your car, it's not Jimmy's fault?
Oh, that's a good one. I should have fucking said that.
Really gotta start with that.
Yeah. Yeah, let's put that at the beginning of the video. Disclaimer. The fueling's clean at our boost level, which is good. Now, what we want to do is we want to check if our ignition timing is where we want it to be, right? We'll do it before we turn the boost up and things get more dangerous. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to pull 2 degrees out of it, and then I'm going to put 2 degrees in it from where we're standing and see how that affects our power bands. Then we're going to look at the data, output it by the dyno, and make a decision.
In the beginning of this video is, those who are watching a little later, what you should have done is shown you on this ECU specifically how to verify TDC timing. So you should have been able to set that timing static, hit it with a timing gun to see if it's actually hitting its target timing. Like say you target 5 degrees or 10 degrees, it needs to be hitting that on the balancer. And then if it's not, if it's a couple degrees off, you can just set a timing offset in your ECU. That is just probably the most important thing. The 2 most important things with tuning, honestly, good injectors, okay? Never cheap out and get cheap injectors, and verify your timing. If you can do those 2 things, you're going to be in a way better place than not verifying your timing and then overshooting timing because you don't know where it's at. Say your timing's 10 degrees out, it's 10 degrees to advance, and you're putting 15 degrees in a boosted car. Well, in reality, you're at 25 degrees of timing, and you're going to probably beat an engine to death if it's not set up to handle that kind of timing or boost or that efficiency. It's not going to be efficient in most cases. But those are things that you should definitely pay attention to if you're starting a build. Always, during first start, verify timing first and make sure you have good injectors.
Based off of that. Everywhere in boost, we'll just take 2 degrees out. Let's see what the dyno tells us, baby. If you're street tuning, cross your fingers. So let's check this out. So if you could look, it's exactly what we expected to see. The middle line is going to be our first timing, our theoretical timing. The lower number will be when we took 2 degrees out, and the higher number will be where we put the 2 degrees in from base, right? We want to see power increase with advance. We want to see power decrease with retard. We only lost 2 horsepower by taking 2 degrees out, but we gained 12 putting it in. But this is where you need to make the call, and this is where experience really comes in hand, and seeing what you can get away with certain setups, certain engines, certain fuel, whatever. So this is where we decide if it's worth it, because we're on that teeter edge of wanting to produce as much power as we can by advancing our timing, but making sure we're not gonna cause the engine to have any situations of knock. If you look at it, we gained 12 horsepower in the very, very tippity top, right? Now, overall, you guys might notice the lines are very similar to each other. So we didn't really gain much power per ignition timing, which means we're very close to that MPT point, that peak torque per ignition timing point. So this isn't worth it. Like, to put 4 degrees in something to pick up almost just a couple horsepower, it's not worth it. You're putting yourself 4 degrees closer in the danger zone. We don't need that. So what that tells us is we could leave the 2 degrees out in this area.
When you pull it off the dyno, right, say you're turning for max brake torque, you pull it off the dyno, well, the thing that I'm sure he knows, he seems like he's been doing it for a minute, but what'll happen is you'll accelerate that engine so much faster RPM wise. The engine's going to RPM harder because there's not going to be a load on it. That means you're spinning tires, basically. Like, anytime that the engine can rev faster, you're actually going to generate more compression from the acceleration of the RPM. The accelerated compression is only going to make that timing situation even worse. So if you have an engine that can RPM really hard, really fast, doesn't matter what it is, and you tuned it for max brake timing on the dyno, you're going to want to pull timing out of it when you take it off of the dyno so you don't blow it up.
And we won't lessen power, and we'll just gain safety. That makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. But in this area, it did pick up pretty well on the ignition timing. Like, if I put 1 degree and I put 2 degrees and it picks up 10, 15, 20 horsepower, it means it likes it. You could be under timed, and this is a huge process too. When I first started tuning, I was scared of ignition timing. I was freaked out by it because I was like, if I put a bunch of timing in it, it's gonna detonate, I'm gonna break a piston, everyone's gonna hate me, right? Like, that's what it is. But there becomes danger with lack of ignition timing because other aspects come into effect. The big thing is you're creating more heat and you're creating more back pressure. And with that, it's also gonna promote detonation. So there is a window, so don't be scared to go after it, but obviously don't be too aggressive. So now the question is, what do I want to do? So this will get more exaggerated as we increase the power by turning the boost up. So let's start turning the boost up, correcting the fuel to the boost, and then we'll try this test again at higher boost numbers, and it should give us better data. So we got plenty of room to put some boost in this thing, so we're gonna turn up on the boost controller and make some more power. So of course, try to do this in increments, and as you do it, adjust your fueling accordingly, because now you're gonna be in different load cells, right? Because now we are at 1 boost, which is gonna put us higher in the next level of load cells, and if you keep adjusting your fueling accordingly, by the time you get to the peak boost, your graph should be clean in all the zones. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna put 20% in this thing and see how much power she makes. We did 3 pulls back to back, increasing the boost levels by about 2 psi on each pull, or a psi and a half. And as you could see, each graph got larger because, of course, as we increase boost, it increases power, which is sick. That's why turbo cars are so fun. It makes you feel like a god when you're tuning, because you're like, I'm making so much power. You're just turning the duty cycle up. So now we are officially at 335 horsepower and 330 foot-pounds of torque. And now, this is where we have to make another call. When do we stop? You could keep turning the boost up. The turbo is at like 18 psi. It can make a lot more. When do you call it? This is where you need to do your research and make sure you understand how strong the internals of your engine are. If it's an NAT setup, if it's a turbo engine, whatever, there's plenty of data online. For me, I don't like making more than like 315 foot-pounds of torque, 325 foot-pounds of torque on a stock SR. And we're a little bit past that. So we're gonna pull a little bit out of it. But for learning ideas, now let's readjust our timing and see what we get here, because now we should have a larger resolution of results due to timing. Let's run it back to back. We're gonna pull 2 degrees of timing from where we're at, and then we're gonna add two. Let's just start with pulling 2 degrees first, okay? Well, this is a good thing. This is why you start by pulling timing first. So if you look at this, we look at the 2 graphs, and we're gonna pick the zones where we basically remove the timing, which is gonna be all right here. So as you can see, it's the same freaking color. Nice work, Dyno, but made slightly less power pulling the 2 degrees out as we'd expect. The crazy thing is we didn't lose much power at all, nor did the boost curve change much at all, which tells us a lot. We're very close to that peak torque per ignition timing, that NPT number that we talked about early on, which tells us we're probably close to the knocking range. We lost negligible horsepower doing it, which means what? Keep it out. It's doing nothing for us. It's putting us towards the danger zone. And I mean, look at it. Like, there's at no point. It's so close. Like, we lost maybe overall 3 horsepower all around, which is 1%. So that's going to tell us to keep that timing out. We don't see our boost curve change much at all. Our fueling stays nice and clean, and we produce similar power. It's not worth it. But I think this puts us in that good balance between safe and producing efficient power. So if you look at the difference of these 2 graphs, this is the difference between 4 degrees of timing. The biggest worry is this point, right? Our peak torque point. That is the most dangerous spot ever. Torque is what's going to blow your engine apart, right? And the sooner you make it, the more dangerous it is. So if you're going to target anywhere, you want to target here, right? This is the big thing right here. And you can control this with your ignition timing. We have been doing an overall global drop in ignition timing, but if you wanted to, you could still pull more out of this area to kind of dampen that peak torque number if it's too aggressive. But that being said, if you look at our peak, we actually kind of lost quite a bit of power in our peak here. So what we could do is we could put 2 degrees back in up top while leaving the timing.
So he's making a really good point. Now, peak torque is going to be different on different engines. So something that makes it hugely different, honestly, is the turbo that's on the car. If you want a stock engine to live, okay, we're talking even if it's a boosted or NA engine, if you want it to live, okay, you're going to want to put a turbo on it that spools higher in the RPM range versus lower. If you get something like a Disco Potato, which is a super old turbo, like you can't even buy them anymore in original form, it's going to make all that torque now. Like, you're on the throttle, it's going to make torque really down in the low RPM, and it'll boost in the top RPM. The reason why you don't want the torque so early, okay, it's not about the torque hurting the motor as much as it is the amount of time those rods and pistons and wrist pins and bearings are under stress is longer under a lower RPM load. So when it's making all of the torque it possibly can, if you're doing that down low, you're actually stressing the piston, the wrist pin, and the connecting rod and the bearing more than if you're going to make peak torque at a high RPM. It doesn't really care at that point because the engine's rotating faster. That time frame at which that piston is under load is going to be negligible. It's going to be safer. It's not going to stress it as much, and you can. That's why you see all these people going big turbo on like stock LS motors and stuff like that, because they want to make big power, but they also know if they make big power down low early, it's going to shred it.
Out over here and then just blend it, and then we split the difference. All about balance, making the calls. And like I said, that's the difference between someone who's done this for a long time and they've seen what they can. That call is up to you. Let's blend the 2 maps, do a final pull, and I think we're going to leave it. There we have it right here. We have a nice long torque curve, which is really nice. No crazy peak at a low RPM. That's we have anything to worry about. Carries it out nice and well. Power is super linear and pulls really good. This should be extremely fun to drive. I know like 330 horsepower doesn't sound super exciting, but in a car like this, it's a stock SR. It's fun. This is where these things kind of thrive. It's a part of the experience. We gave you guys a very general idea on how to tune a car, and I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope you take these concepts and are able to apply them to not only maybe do something with them, but to just get a better understanding on how things work and how you might modify your setup differently, knowing how these processes all happen. This is the thing. This one went really smoothly. This is a smaller power car. It's a very simple car. There's no VTC, there's no VTEC, there's no nitrous, there's no ITBs, there's nothing crazy. And so there's so many more variables that can stack on, and that's what will make or break you as a tuner. Honestly, the biggest thing is when things don't go right. When you're having fueling issues, when you're having boost creep issues, when you're having weird feeling, when your ignition timing's not making sense, when the ignition timing is walking, like that's what's really the
I had more plans today, but overall, this guy's channel, he did a really good job at explaining the basics. Seems like a knowledgeable dude, and he wanted to explain more, but it's all good. I wanted to do a dive in with you guys and show you guys how to do some tuning on some platforms, but we didn't get enough viewers today, which is okay. Next time my live stream I actually want to do a car live with you guys where I'm tuning it for a client. So, and I'll let you guys be part of the experience. Anyways, this is Dave at HDR Performance.